So I've come to the University of Cambridge Museums of Archaeology and Anthropology and the Museum of Zoology to look at an object which never fails to completely amaze me.
Okay, it doesn't look very impressive, I know. A sharpened rock of brown quartzite, just over 20 centimetres long. But 1.6 million years ago, a person went to the trouble of shaping this to put on the top of an axe and use it in their day-to-day life.
This person was an early human, Homo erectus, part of a group of newly evolved animals whose descendants would go on to reproduce, spread, and have a bigger impact on the planet than any animal before or since. Where did this species come from, and how did they differ from others that had gone before them? And how did they become so successful? Certainly, part of it must have been their ability to make tools like that axe, not to mention their ability to communicate by means of language. But of all the different hominid species, all humans today evolved from just one. The name of this species tells us a lot about why it was so successful. Our scientific name is Homo sapiens, literally meaning the knowing man. So it's our capacity for thinking or knowing which most distinguishes us from non-human animals. And for as long as human beings have walked the earth, they've pondered the question, why am I me? To ask this question gets to the very essence of what it is to be us. Does a chicken ever wonder why she looks different from a dog? Does a squirrel ask itself why it loves to bury nuts? Does a bear ever stop to ask where the salmon in the stream came from? Non-human animals, it seems, are content to simply act on their instincts for food, shelter, and warmth. So far as we know, humans alone are capable of stopping and asking why. The story of genetics is the history of human scientific efforts to answer this seemingly simple question. In this series of lessons, we'll learn about some of the extraordinary discoveries that reveal the amazing elegance of how life on Earth works. We'll get hands-on with some experiments of our own and learn about the triumphs and failings, fears and passions of the people who made these discoveries. Let's start by trying to put this object and the person who made it into some sort of historical context. What happened in the millions of years between the formation of the Earth and the arrival of our hominid ancestors? And what happened in the intervening years between when this axe was made and today? On your worksheet, you'll find a list of events in Earth's history. In the next part of the video, I'm going to tell you when and in what order scientists think these things happened. Before watching this, look at the events, make sure you understand what each one means, and try to think about what order they might have happened in. Pause the video now if you want to try this. According to scientists, the planet Earth was formed 4.6 billion years ago. Back then, it was a very different place than it is now. There was no oxygen in the atmosphere, and the temperature was so hot that the whole planet was basically one big ball of molten rock. 4.53 billion years ago, Earth is said to have collided with another planet, Theia, causing the moon to form in orbit around us. As the planet gradually cooled, oceans began to appear. This is thought to have happened around 4.4 billion years ago. It took almost another billion years, 3.8 billion years ago, before single-celled organisms, bacteria, began to appear in these oceans. No one is quite sure how or why this happened. Some people have theorized that chemicals began to form into proteins which competed for molecules in these hot, soupy seas. Others have suggested that these bacteria, our ancestors in fact, may have come to us carried on asteroids from outer space. Up until this point, there was still no oxygen in the atmosphere. But as all these unicellular organisms grew and grew, they began to oxygenate the air, causing an atmosphere. This great oxidation event, as scientists call it, took place 2.4 billion years ago. Nothing much happened for another couple of billion years or so. The bacteria continued to grow and the atmosphere continued to oxygenate. Single-cell organisms became tiny, multi-celled sea creatures about 1.2 billion years ago, and then seaweed a little later, about 1 billion years ago. Then, about 500,000 years ago, wham! Scientists have called it the Cambrian explosion, about 100 million years in which the diversity of life on Earth absolutely skyrocketed. Huge and complex marine animals evolved, and with all the oxygen in the air, plants began to appear on land too. Then, around 440 million years ago, one curious marine fish decided to climb out of the water and have a look around. By 423 million years ago, we begin to see land animals in the fossil record. Another couple of 100 million years pass and the dinosaurs have evolved from lizards 230 million years ago. Sadly for them, they all get wiped out in a single mass extinction event 65 million years ago. Early human species begin to appear in Africa, where our axe head was found, between 2 and 6 million years ago. 1.8 million years ago, they begin to migrate out of Africa. Homo sapiens appears and very quickly starts to take over everything about 1.3 million years ago. By 150 to 200,000 years ago, we see evidence of humans using language. At this point, they are still nomadic hunter-gatherers, moving around the land in search of naturally occurring food. 12,000 years ago, they learned to farm the land and begin to settle into villages, towns, and cities. We see evidence of writing springing up independently in Persia, now Iran, China, and Central America between 5 and 3,000 years ago. And human societies invent money in order to trade and manage resources around 3,000 years ago. So, while the 1.6 million year old axe head and its maker might seem very old, relatively speaking, we humans have hardly been here for any time at all.
How did you get on with the activity? Was there anything that surprised you about the timeline of events in the history of planet Earth? With such enormous numbers, it can be difficult to visualize how these events relate to each other and to understand how we as a species came to be.
One idea scientists sometimes use to help people to grasp this is the 24-hour clock image, where we imagine the whole of Earth's 4.6 billion year history taking place in a period of just one day. If we do that, we can see that 1 billion years passes by every 5 hours and 12 minutes or so. The oxygenation of the atmosphere happens just before the middle of the period, 2.4 billion years ago, around 11:30 on our clock. The whole of the first half of Earth's history takes place in the absence of oxygen, with the only life being tiny microbes in the sea, who begin to appear around 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:06 a.m. Very early in the morning, the moon has appeared, about 20 past midnight. And the oceans have appeared, about 20 to 1. The development of human civilization, farming, writing, towns, cities, money, all appear in the very last few milliseconds of the day. Now, can you work out where all the remaining events should appear on the clock? Follow the instructions on your worksheet to do this. If you get stuck, don't worry, this is just for fun. And as always, if you need any help, just send me a message via your virtual classroom.